Hi, everybody. Welcome back, and thank you for lending me your ear. I think the Lori Daybell case has progressed far enough for us to talk about it. I hardly think that there is anyone following true crime who is not aware on some level of what the Lori Vallow Daybell case is about. But in short, Laurie and Chad were both married to other people, had strange beliefs, which they believed to be religious beliefs, and used those beliefs to excuse their deeds being to rid themselves of their spouses and Laurie's children. I know most people look at cases superficially or they look at it judgmentally. But I always want to know why, the psychology, the brain function behind the action. And when it comes to Chad and Laurie, the mystery deepens the more we hear and see. Laurie had been married 5 times if we include her co-accused Chad Daybell. We know very little about her first 2 husbands, but one of them is the biological father of Laurie's son, Colby Ryan. Her third husband, Joseph Ryan, adopted Colby, and therefore he grew up with the surname Ryan. Joseph Ryan died after Laurie and him split. As a matter of fact, Laurie was already with Charles Vallow and was in a custody battle with Joseph when he died. The official verdict was that Joseph died of heart failure, but although it may be too late to prove otherwise, we can truthfully add that by the time he was found, he had been dead for a while and decomposition had already started. Laurie's behavior afterwards was also not quite normal, but let's move on to Charles Vallow, a divorced father of 2. By all accounts, Charles was an entrepreneur, a successful businessman with varied interests and the ability to make a success of whatever he sets out to do. Although Laurie convinced Charles that Joseph Ryan was a bad husband and father and all in all a bad person, overall, as an outsider and knowing what we know now, Charles and Joseph likely had more in common than they knew and realized. They had a similar look, similar interests, similar ambitions, etc. Laurie also had a biological daughter with Joseph Ryan, namely Tylee, and when they split, Laurie also followed the same pattern as with Colby. Laurie did not want contact between Tylee and Joseph, and she wanted Charles, the new man, to be the sole father figure. Unfortunately for her, and unlike with Colby, Joseph Ryan fought to stay in his daughter's life, and hence the custody and access battle. Joseph and Charles had something else in common. Joseph was also attacked by Alex Cox like Charles would be a few years later. Alex attacked Joseph with a taser and even spent a short time in jail for it. But of course, Laurie was able to convince Charles Vallow that everything was Joseph's fault. Such was her skill at manipulation. Of course, some would say that her skill at manipulation would be even better illustrated by the fact that she would convince Alex, her brother, to attack Joseph in the first place, and of course, as we learned later, even kill for her. But for me, that is a little hard to swallow. I'm not young and have been around the block a few times, and in my experience, most people can be manipulated, but up to a point. It should not be possible to manipulate someone who is physically and morally opposed to something to do that very thing. Once that happens, it's no longer manipulation, but instead more like brainwashing, a skill usually only taught to specialists in the military, etc., and a skill very few individuals of average intelligence actually possess. So somehow Alex Cox was either prone to violence and murder and would have eventually done the same or similar even if Lori was not in his life, or the relationship between Lori and her brother Alex was far more complicated than we thought. I sincerely doubt Lori was an expert on brainwashing techniques, because clearly every now and then someone realized something was wrong and therefore was not completely brainwashed. Okay, and then Lori met Chad Daybell, and here is where the mystery starts. Chad is so unlike Joseph Ryan and Charles Vallow that it is difficult, almost impossible, to understand why Lori would want him, let alone fight for him or commit a crime to be with him. Lori, by the time she met Chad, had 3 children. Colby, who was by then married himself and out of the house, Tylee, who was 15, 16 by that time, and JJ, who was 6, and whom she and Charles adopted together. One can imagine that life as a stay-at-home mom can be boring at times, but the mutual pursuit between Lori and Chad surpassed basic boredom. Chad, an adult male with a healthy, fit, and not exactly ugly wife, and 5 children, all technically adults, even went so far as to call Lori a goddess. So the first question arises: was Chad manipulating and gaslighting Lori more than she did him, or was he so weak-minded that she manipulated him to the point where he did what he did? All in all, we have here one woman, Lori, and 2 men, Chad and Alex. Chad, her love interest, and Alex, her brother. And indeed, if you look at it and consider it, it is indeed a very strange combination. Had it not been for the pattern of manipulation and death which started before Lori met Chad, I would have said that Chad was the narcissistic gaslighter and manipulator, the main instigator. But then, how do we explain what happened before Alex attacking Joseph Ryan on Lori's behalf? Maybe we can say that Chad and Lori was the evil connection. But what then about Alex? At the end of the day, the common denominator remains Lori Vallow Daybell. And one has no alternative but to think that Lori was the main instigator, manipulator, the ultimate narcissist and gaslighter. But why then did she choose Chad? Chad was certainly not Lori's type, not in looks nor in potential. Chad, overweight and certainly not attractive. Chad, who effectively was nothing without his wife. Remember, Chad was a grave digger before he became a so-called author. And remember, when we say he was an author, we have to mention that he was self-published and that his wife Tammy, along with her regular job, ran their so-called publishing company. Then we should also take into consideration that Chad did not even publish to places like Amazon, etc. Or maybe he did, but his books made no major impact. The only place his books had any impact was on the LDS religious platforms and at all those quasi-religious meetings. I have not read any of Chad's books, but judging by his texts that are being read in court, he can't be any good or too good at all. I'm willing to bet that his wife Tammy rewrote most of his books in order to correct the spelling and grammar. However, suffice it to say, Chad had no financial prospects, no major business deals, no beautiful home or flashy cars. Chad effectively had nothing and was nothing, except that Chad also used his nothingness to come across as vulnerable and sweet and cuddly and possibly awakened the motherliness in women. But we know Lori was described as sexy and vivacious more than motherly, although most said that there was a time when she appeared to be a good mother. But I believe that although it served Chad to be this sad sack teddy bear which all the women, including his wife, wanted to save and hug and feed, there was still a man inside that unsightly body with its wobbly stomach, weak and double chin. And when Laurie came along and wagged her tail at him, it was something he was not used to, and which awakened something in him, something he had to have and preserve at all costs. From her side, consciously or subconsciously, Laurie recognized his vulnerabilities and saw him as the ideal tool to get what she wanted. Of course, the evil which took place during and after the affair in itself is difficult to comprehend and is in itself a mystery. The usual element of sex, greed, and money were present. Laurie and Chad, for instance, thought that she was going to get Charles's life insurance money, and when that did not happen, Brandon Boudreaux, Laurie's niece's husband, had to go, and of course Chad's wife Tammy. And don't forget that Tylee, Laurie's daughter, also inherited from her father Joseph Ryan, and Laurie also received benefits for both children. So yes, there are certainly financial benefits in getting rid of these people, but it is not in that element where the mystery lies. The mystery for me lies in how cold and devoid of any emotion both Chad and Laurie are. There's no part of me which understands a mother knowing her brother and lover are taking her child to go murder him and her, because Laurie knew if she did not partake in the murders herself, then at the very least she knew what was about to happen. We know that now because of texts between Laurie and Alex after the children were killed. One text in particular in which Alex gives Laurie a password and explains it as 2 kids too many, and she replies that he is funny. We also know Alex shot Charles Vallow. He actually admitted to it. But we also now know that it was planned between Laurie, Chad, and Alex, and again we know this from text between the three of them. We also now know that Laurie and Chad joked about it, and Chad was fully cooperating and invested in the plan, because not only did he call a funeral home for a quote for cremation after Charles's death, but in another text he typed, "Wouldn't it be funny if it was changed after he got 2 bullets in the chest," referring to the policy of which the beneficiary was changed. So when we look at the 2 people being charged for the deaths, we have a wife who did nothing to prevent her husband from being killed, and we have a mother who, if she had not taken part in the actual killing of her children, had let them go like lambs to the slaughter to be killed in the most gruesome fashion. We have Teddy Bear Chad, who either fully partook in the murders of the children or stood by and watched it happen, and likely, at the very least, took part in the dismemberment and burning of Tylee. And again, how do we know this? Again, because he informed his wife via text that he shot a raccoon and burned 3 limbs on the very day Tylee was killed, dismembered and burned. How does a human who lived a normal life for so many years bring himself to do that, and then afterwards carry on with life as usual? And then Tammy, his wife of many years. We now know her cause of death was asphyxiation, but we don't know yet whether she was strangled or smothered, as we have not heard from the medical experts yet. But how does a normal human get up at night and physically do this to someone they have lived with for so long? Neither strangulation nor smothering takes only a second. It is a prolonged process which can take minutes and requires effort and physical strength. What went through this average, fat, middle-aged man's head while he was doing all of this? What did he think the benefits would be for him in the long run? I know that a lot is being made of the mutual strange beliefs, the zombies and the evil spirits, the multiple lives, and so on. But none of it is really original. And different variations can be found in many different religions, belief systems, science fiction, and horror stories. I don't believe either Chad or Lori actually fully believe their own nonsense. We have now heard from Melanie and Zulema Pastenis that although they fell for some of it, they did not fully believe in all of it, but just went along with it. Who knows why? Maybe for that sense of belonging, to be part of a group, and so on. What I previously got from Melanie was that she was almost infatuated with Lori. In the same light, I do think Lori and Chad had a certain level of religious belief, but it wasn't enough to secure the adulation, the following, the blind faith which they required to excuse and get away with their murderous plans. So they expanded on their religious dogma as they went along, and very soon it turned into something evil. So that is it for today. As the court case continues and more information comes out, it is very likely that I will hop back on and discuss the case some more. But in the meantime, next week, we will look at other mysteries and see whether we can do anything to raise awareness and bring conclusions to those mysteries as well. So until we meet again on the next video, please take good care of yourselves and each other. Bye.